With Halloween just passing and autumn and winter upon us, I thought it would be a great time to do these cute Pinterest-inspired moon DIYs. Just a disclaimer though, none of these ideas or artwork are my own. I just found them off Pinterest and I will leave all the links in the description, giving the original creators all due credit. Okay, let's get started. So starting off, we're going to make this moon phase garland. So the first thing I did was draw the moon shapes. I'm using thick watercolor paper so that the shapes are nice and sturdy, and I also used a mug to help me get a perfect circle. Also, just a heads up, throughout this video my camera's focus kind of acts up, and also what I wear changes because I filmed this over the course of a few days. It's not that big of a deal, but I thought I'd mention it. So as you can see, I am using the mug to get the outline of the circle, and then I'm just going in and drawing the various moon shapes by just eyeing it. So to start off, I drew and cut out 7 pieces, including the full moon, and then you can trace the pieces that need to be doubled, and that way you have an identical pair, so by the end of it you should have 13 pieces. So because I'm starting off with white paper, I am painting mine gold because that is the picture I am basing it off of, but you can paint it any color you want. In the picture I'm referencing, there are 3 different lengths that the moons are hanging from, 3 long, 6 medium, and 4 small, and I will have the exact measurements I used on the screen. In the picture, if you look closely, you can see that they use chain for the shapes, but I had twine lying around, so that's what I used, but you can use any material that you have lying around or chain if you want to go through that whole process. This is a completely optional step depending on the material you're using, but since I was using twine and it kind of has this irregular shape and I wanted it to lay flat, I had to straighten mine. So yeah, you might not have to do this, but I thought I'd mention it for those of you who might have to. To adhere my shape to the twine, I am using hot glue, but you can use any way you like and whatever you're comfortable with. Once I had all my pieces, I set those aside and started working on the main twine that those little pieces will hang from. So I just measured where I wanted it, which was above my mirror, and I cut an appropriate length of twine, and then I halved it and marked it with a marker because that is where the full moon will hang. Also, sorry about the focus. This is annoying me too. Using my shapes as a guide, I put the full moon where I marked, and then I put the shapes that are going to go next to it to see, I'm sorry, I just burped, to see how far apart I wanted them. Once I found the appropriate length that I liked, I marked it on my string, and then I kept going down the line 6 times, marking, and then on the other side I went 6 times again. So again, I am using hot glue to adhere the twine connected to the shape to the main piece of twine, and I'm also using wax paper underneath that so I can easily pull it away once it's dry. Then you can just go down the line connecting the pieces of twine with the shapes to the places that you marked with the marker earlier. So because hot glue tends to have little stringy bits, I just went in with the scissors and cut off those extra random little stringy bits and pieces to make it look a little nicer and a little cleaner. Because I wasn't putting it on a wall, I was putting it above my mirror, I also had to pull it up in the middle, so it is a little different than the picture, but I'm still really happy with the way it turned out. next DIY, we're going to make this really pretty moon-inspired dish. So I picked up this really cute, inexpensive dish from the thrift store. I loved it. I love the shape of it. It's actually not a perfect circle, and I just thought it was really cute and decided that I would use it for this DIY. To start off, I just covered the original design with acrylic paint. At first, I was going to just paint it a crisp white, but then I went back in and just added a little bit of black to the white to make this really pretty gray. Next, using my picture for reference, I just took a pencil and lightly traced out the design that I wanted until I was happy with it. I got these metallic Sharpies from Target. They came with a silver, a gold, and kind of a coppery rose gold. I went with the coppery rose gold for this design. Then you just trace your design. The Sharpie had a weird reaction with the acrylic paint. It didn't really show up as well as I would like, so maybe even using a metallic paint with a small paintbrush or something else, or maybe not acrylic paint, might work better, but that's just something to keep in mind. I think it turned out okay, but I just thought I'd mention that. Work on is this really cool moon crater notebook. For this project, I just picked up some cheap composition books, meaning the insides weren't pretty either, so I decided to make a little inside cover too, so this is what I'm doing now, and I am using some Pinterest planet doodles as inspiration, and I will again leave all the links down below to the ones that I used. I just filled up the entire page with a bunch of planet doodles and constellations and things, and once I was done drawing them in pencil, I just traced them over with a pen. In an earlier clip, you guys saw me trace the outline of the composition book so that I could fit this cover snug inside the book. So that is what I'm cutting out right now. And once I was done cutting it out, it was time to put it inside the cover, and I just used a glue stick, but again, you can use any sort of adhesive that you want. Now moving on to the front cover, I am doing the same method of tracing the composition book so that my cover fits snug, and this time I am taking into account the binding, the black binding, so I marked that too. Then using the picture as a guide, I just drew the various circle shapes that are found on the notebook. So when it comes to cutting them out, I would definitely recommend using a straight edge, not a scissors. You can see here I accidentally stabbed myself. I didn't hurt myself, but yeah, I ditched the scissors and used my mom's straight edge, but if you have like a smaller craft straight edge, I think that would work best, but this is what I'm doing and it worked so much better than the scissors, and I could cut out those tiny little circles too. Again, I'm using thick watercolor paper so that the craters will be deep enough. This is something extra that I did just to add more dimension to the bigger craters, but I just added a ring with a hot glue gun around the 3 bigger craters to make them look more dimensional. And then I just used a glue stick to glue it onto the cover. You can use a stronger glue, but that's what I did. Then going in with Mod Podge, a random old paintbrush, and some tissue paper. This is how we're going to add texture and put everything together. I used the same technique in last year's Halloween DIY video if you want to go check that out for reference, or if you've seen it, but basically we're just taking little pieces of tissue paper and we're putting Mod Podge first onto the book, then we're taking the tissue paper on top of that, and then putting another layer of Mod Podge on top of that. After the entire book or cover is done, then we can go in with our paint, and I just painted it gray. And again, for extra dimension, I just made the middle of the craters a little darker and the places I put hot glue a little lighter. The last DIY in this video is going to be this Crescent moon notebook. I used mostly black acrylic, but some streaks of blue and white to paint over the cover. I had to use 2 coats of paint, so your coats might be different depending on your notebook and your paint. And also, I'm using composition books, but if you want a sturdier, better quality notebook, go ahead. Using some of the leftover paper from my first DIY, I'm just using the mug again and making another crescent moon shape. And then again, like the first DIY, I'm just painting the moon gold. Once I was happy with the moon and the notebook, I just used a glue stick to glue on the moon to the middle of the notebook using my picture for reference. It's a super simple DIY, but I think it turned out really pretty.